Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, and my weekly newsletter are all focused on bringing you the secrets of innovation. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank our customers who subscribe to our AI Fusion Kickstarter program, and to those who leverage AI Fusion coaching to bring human-centered AI into their organizations. You can find us at www.innoguide.net. In this episode, number 60, we're sharing Quirky by Melissa Shilling. Without further ado, please enjoy episode 60, Quirky. Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. Let's get started. Introduction. Don't tell me it's impossible. Let's start with a confession. I've always been fascinated by people who don't have just one great idea, but who somehow keep reshaping the world over and over again. In this chapter, I'm inviting you into that fascination. What makes some people spectacularly innovative? Not the one-hit wonders, not the opportunists. I'm talking about the Elon Musks, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einsteins, and the Marie Curies of the world. Serial disruptors who make the impossible seem routine. The big question here is, where do serial innovators come from? I open by asking, what makes a Musk or a Tesla tick? Musk had no family background in aerospace, automotive, or finance, but taught himself rocket science, built reusable rockets, and turned the car industry upside down. Tesla, eccentric to the point of obsession, delivered alternating current power systems, wireless communication, and remote-controlled robots, often while broke and ridiculed. Einstein revolutionized physics as an unknown patent clerk after universities turned him down. None of these innovators had the right pedigree or unlimited resources, yet they produced paradigm-shifting breakthroughs, often by ignoring the rules everyone else assumed were fixed. Outsiders have an edge. A threat emerges here. Outsiders, precisely because they're outsiders, break molds. Consider Gavriel Idan, an Israeli missile designer who invented the PillCam, a swallowable camera capsule, because he approached gastrointestinal imaging like a missile engineer, not a gastroenterologist. Patients embraced it. Doctors resisted because of their sunk cost in traditional endoscopy. Similarly, Uber and Airbnb upended entrenched taxi and hotel systems because incumbents were too invested in the old ways to pivot. Being unbound by tradition often means you see fresh possibilities others can't. Why standard research falls short. As a researcher, I tried to answer these questions the traditional way, big data sets, statistical analysis, but serial innovators are rare, too busy to study, and wildly idiosyncratic. Most inventors are one-hit wonders, and the data you gather about their lives is scant. That's why I turned to a deeper, more biographical approach, studying people like Steve Jobs, Dean Kamen, and Benjamin Franklin case by case. I began this journey while pondering Apple's future without Steve Jobs. Was Apple's magic in the company or the man? That led me to study Jobs in depth, his beliefs, quirks, and contradictions, and then compare him to other serial innovators. What I found was both unexpected and surprisingly consistent. Jobs and Dean Kamen, for example, share uncanny parallels. Both were college dropouts with no deep training in their fields. Both wore the same clothes every day, and both openly flouted social norms. Jobs parked in handicap spots. Kamen built his own island nation. Both refused to accept impossible as an answer. Kamen once said, "Don't tell me it's impossible. Tell me you can't do it." Jobs echoed the same philosophy. Everything around you is made up by people no smarter than you, and you can change it. So, here are the common threads: quirks, detachment, and idealism. Across my sample, some traits stand out. Most innovators exhibited deep social detachment. Marie Curie's self-imposed isolation, Edison's deafness and marathon work habits, Musk's lonely childhood, Einstein's outsider status, this separateness freed them from groupthink and dominant norms. They also had near limitless belief in their own abilities, self-efficacy. Musk walked 10 miles alone at age 6 to a birthday party of a cousin. He resurrected the space program when NASA gave up on Mars and became what I call a walking moonshot. Kamen dismissed the laws of thermodynamics as man's laws. Tesla's grand claims were mocked until he made them real. Finally, they were powered by idealism. Tesla dreamed of free global energy. Musk wants to solve climate change and colonize Mars. Franklin pursued egalitarianism and civic virtue. Marie Curie believed education and science could preserve Poland. Idealism gave them resilience, focus, and the ability to forego comfort, reputation, and even family life to pursue their missions. Work as play and obsession. Another pattern, they genuinely loved working. Edison claimed work made the earth a paradise for me and had no interest in retirement. This autotelic drive, working for the sake of work, meant they found flow, persistence, and pleasure in labors others would find grueling. Structuring Quirky. I've organized Quirky around 3 themes I saw emerge. 1. Creativity and originality. How their unconventional thinking sparked breakthrough ideas. 2. Effort and persistence. Why they worked so relentlessly to bring those ideas to life. And 3. Situational advantage. The timing, environment, and resources that helped their innovations thrive. In the opening chapters, we'll explore how their quirks made them original thinkers. Midway, we'll see how idealism and energy fueled their persistence. And later, we'll dive into how timing and access to resources mattered. Finally, we'll pull it all together with lessons for unlocking your own innovative potential or nurturing it in your team or children. This chapter sets the stage for a book about more than just talent. It's about how extraordinary innovators combine unusual personalities, relentless drive, and the outsider's perspective to achieve the seemingly impossible. And the biggest revelation? While their quirks make them unique, many of the mechanisms they use, solitude, idealism, self-directed learning, boundary crossing, are available to all of us. We may never be Einstein, Curie, or Musk, but we can apply parts of their playbook to unleash more of our own creative potential. Chapter 1. A sense of separateness. In this first chapter, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of the most consistent traits I've seen in serial breakthrough innovators, something that's as uncomfortable as it is powerful. I call it a sense of separateness. Separateness shows up as a feeling fundamentally different from other people, often from a very young age. It can look like shyness, a lack of interest in social rules, or even total immersion in one's own world. And while sometimes it's chosen, often it's the byproduct of upbringing, personality, or circumstance. The key is that innovators feel and act differently, and this gives them the freedom to question the assumptions everyone else takes for granted. Einstein, the poster child for detachment. Albert Einstein is our central example. He openly wrote about his own detachment in The World as I See It, explaining he had deep compassion for humanity, but little need for direct social contact. Even as a child, Einstein spoke late, muttered phrases under his breath, a behavior called echolalia, and avoided group play. Teachers doubted he'd succeed at anything, but he devoured advanced math and physics on his own, books gifted by a family friend, Max Talmud. That sense of separateness was critical later, because Einstein wasn't tethered to the academic hierarchy. He could take bold risks in his thinking. Working at the Swiss Patent Office, he developed special relativity, quantum ideas about light, Brownian motion, and eventually E = mc squared, all while others were still clinging to outdated theories. His independence insulated him from groupthink and freed him to imagine the universe as it might be, not as he was told it was. Marie Curie, the anti-natural life. Marie Curie, whose story I preview here but tell more fully in Chapter 6, was similarly separate. Barred from attending university in Poland, she built her own self-education regimen, physics, sociology, anatomy, algebra, you name it, while working as a governess. Later at the Sorbonne, she lived in freezing attic rooms on buttered bread and tea, rejecting social gatherings and material comforts. Even after marrying Pierre Curie, she maintained an almost monastic devotion to her lab, leaving child-rearing largely to her father-in-law. Her anti-natural lifestyle yielded 2 Nobel Prizes, but also at great emotional cost. Other icons of separateness? This pattern repeats across innovators. Steve Jobs felt abandoned but special as an adopted child and embraced unconventional habits, diets, and behaviors, right down to his reality distortion field that bent other people's sense of what was possible. Thomas Edison spent most of his life in laboratories, was mostly deaf, and shunned social life to focus on experiments. Nikola Tesla worked alone at night, confessed he loved humanity but not humans, and once wrote at length about a pigeon he believed was his soulmate. Elon Musk was bullied, bookish, and frequently moved schools, preferring programming and science fiction to socializing. Dean Kamen, inventor of the Segway and countless medical devices, refused to take tests or attend classes, dropped out of college, and has pursued one audacious project after another, like drinking water purified from his own urine to prove a point. All of these people spent vast amounts of time alone. Solitude helped them develop original thought experiments, from Einstein's light beam musings to Jobs tinkering with Apple prototypes. In fact, research on brainstorming shows individuals generate more and more original ideas working alone than in groups, thanks to fewer interruptions, less self-censorship, and more mental space. Separateness and solitude are also self-reinforcing. People who don't fit in retreat further. People who retreat further develop more unorthodox thinking. For innovators, that loop often leads to extraordinary independence. Nonconformity and rebellion. Separateness often blossoms into rule-breaking. Einstein distrusted authority from the moment he discovered the Bible's inconsistencies at age 12. Edison refused to accept received wisdom about electricity. Jobs ignored social rules and hygiene while persuading people to do impossible things. Kamen jokes that outside of the laws of physics and the periodic table, all the rest are man's laws. That mindset, rules don't apply to me, is dangerous if misused, but catalytic for paradigm-breaking innovation. The double-edged sword. Separateness gives innovators permission to pursue audacious ideas. It buffers them from conformity and opens space for original thought. But it can also create loneliness, make it harder to access resources, and slow adoption of their ideas. Einstein's 1905 papers met a chilly silence until Max Planck endorsed them. Benjamin Franklin's success as an innovator of social institutions partly stemmed from his opposite approach. He cultivated vast networks, persuasive speech, and a moderate tone to get ideas implemented. Lessons for families and organizations. There are 4. 1. Protect time alone. Give people space to think before group discussions. Google and 3M famously allocated personal project time for this reason. 2. Signal tolerance for weirdness. Breakthrough innovators often look or act unconventional. Don't filter them out before their talent shows. 3. Balance social skills with independence. Encourage creativity, but don't smother individuality under pressure to conform. And 4. Be willing to hire the barefoot kid. Atari did this with Jobs, and it paid off. The takeaway is this: separateness is not introversion, nor is it antisocialness. It's a deeply felt sense of standing apart, of not belonging to the herd. For Einstein, Curie, Jobs, Musk, and others, it was both shield and sword, shielding them from conformity and cutting paths into new territory. As Apple later put it, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. Chapter 2. He's like a walking moonshot. Extreme confidence. Let me be upfront. If Chapter 1 was about the outsider's lens, this chapter is about the rocket fuel that lets outsiders actually attempt the impossible. Psychologists call it self-efficacy, the deep belief that you can solve problems and achieve objectives others see as impossible. In this chapter, I show how extreme self-efficacy powers audacious goals, using Elon Musk as the archetype. Self-efficacy in action. Dean Kamen and Steve Jobs both had such unshakable faith in their own reasoning and insight that they routinely ignored the rules constraining everyone else. This I can do it attitude isn't arrogance for its own sake, it's a task-specific self-confidence that opens up bolder opportunities. High self-efficacy lets innovators take on bigger problems, persist longer, and shrug off criticism or failure. Elon Musk, with his plans to colonize Mars and reinvent the global energy system, exemplifies self-efficacy at its highest level. Musk roots, a family of adventurers and rebels. Musk's extreme confidence didn't come from nowhere. His maternal grandfather, Joshua Haldeman was a pilot, political iconoclast, and leader of Canada's technocracy party. Haldeman openly defied the government, left Canada for South Africa on a whim, and ferried his wife and 4 kids across continents and oceans. He flew a single-engine plane 33,000 miles round trip to Australia and took part in an 8,000-mile rally across Africa. In that household, adventure was normal and boundaries were meant to be pushed. As Musk's uncle put it, there's nothing a Haldeman can't do. Growing up, Musk was small, bullied, and intensely introspective, so much so his family once feared he might be deaf. Instead, he was lost in thought and books. He devoured science fiction and fantasy, read the Encyclopedia Britannica cover to cover, and taught himself computer programming at 10. By 12, he'd created and sold his first video game for $500. When his parents forbade him from attending a cousin's birthday party at age 6, he simply walked 10 miles across Pretoria to get there. This pattern, early wins, self-teaching, and independent action, became his lifelong signature. Leaving South Africa and betting on himself, Musk always saw America as the place where great things are possible. At 17, against his father's wishes, he left for Canada with only a few $1,000s and odd jobs to support himself. He transferred from Queen's University to the University of Pennsylvania, earning degrees in physics and economics, and he was accepted to Stanford for a PhD in physics. 2 days into Stanford, however, he saw the internet gold rush and quit. With $2,000, a car, and a computer, he launched Zip2, which sold for $307 million 4 years later. At 28, he was a millionaire, but instead of retiring to the beach, he doubled down. From online payments to rockets and electric cars, Musk co-founded X.com, which became PayPal, netting $165 million when eBay acquired it. Then he used his own fortune to take on humanity's biggest challenges. He founded SpaceX in 2002 after realizing NASA had no plans for Mars, teaching himself rocket science from textbooks and spreadsheets. Told by Russian engineers that his plan was impossible, he designed his own rockets instead. He funded Solar City to accelerate solar adoption and became the chairman of Tesla Motors, pushing for a sexy high-performance electric car to smash the stereotype of boring EVs. Musk's fingerprints were everywhere at Tesla, insisting on carbon fiber instead of fiberglass, redesigning headlights, lowered door sills, and custom seats, all while pouring in $55 million of his own cash. The first Tesla Roadsters stunned reviewers, 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, 220 miles per charge, and more spacecraft than sports car. But the company lost $82 million its first year and faced daunting infrastructure challenges. Meanwhile, SpaceX's first 3 launches failed. By 2008, Musk was in debt, divorcing, and on the verge of a breakdown. Yet he kept going. The 4th rocket, the turnaround, and the walking moonshot. Then, in September 2008, SpaceX's 4th launch succeeded. NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.5 billion contract. In a few years, Tesla launched the Model S, Consumer Reports' highest rating ever, broke ground on the Gigafactory, and landed the first reusable Falcon 9 rocket on a drone ship in the Atlantic. Google's Astro Teller dubbed Musk a walking moonshot. Musk himself coolly says, "There's only a tiny handful of people, Bezos, Gates, Page, who could do what he's doing." How high self-efficacy works. Self-efficacy isn't blind optimism. It's built from experience. Musk's encyclopedia facts, video game sale at 12, Zip2 exit, and relentless problem-solving reinforced his belief he could tackle bigger challenges. Steve Jobs had his blue box moment with Wozniak when they made blue boxes that allowed them to make telephone calls by generating the touch tones on payphones and home phones. Benjamin Franklin became Silence Dogood, a pen name he used to write for his brother's publishing company, to see his words in print. Marie Curie and Edison both racked up early wins that taught them patience and tenacity. These I did it moments form a mental blueprint. I can solve hard problems. Setbacks are temporary. Audacity pays off. That's why someone like Musk, fresh off a rejection in Moscow, can turn on his laptop and sketch out his own rocket. It's why Edison tried thousands of filaments for his light bulb, and Curie fainted in her lab from exhaustion but kept working. High self-efficacy mediates between idea and action. It makes risk look like a challenge, not doom. 3 ways self-efficacy is born. 1. Personal experience. Early wins like Musk's game sale, Edison's teenage business, or Franklin's secret letters. 2. Vicarious experience. Seeing heroes succeed, like Musk watching Netscape's IPO, or Nike employees hearing Bowerman's waffle iron story about how the Nike sole pattern was inspired when eating waffles. 3. Verbal persuasion. Encouragement can boost children's confidence, but is less effective in adults unless paired with genuine achievement. Together, these elements create a feedback loop. Success breeds confidence, which breeds boldness, which breeds more success. The big takeaway here, extreme confidence, self-efficacy, doesn't just make innovators feel good. It makes them take action when others freeze. It allows them to persist through failure and pour enormous effort into their visions. Musk's story illustrates that what looks like risk-seeking may actually be a different perception of risk. I can overcome this. For us, the lesson is clear. If we want to nurture innovation in ourselves, in our children, our organizations, we need to create opportunities for early wins, let people wrestle with hard problems, and celebrate bold but intelligent attempts even when they fail. High self-efficacy is not just a personality trait, it's a muscle we can help people build. Chapter 3. Ideas came in an uninterrupted stream, the creative mind. Let's talk about the deep engine under the hood of breakthrough innovation, the creative mind itself. In the last chapters, we saw how extreme confidence, self-efficacy propels people like Elon Musk to tackle impossible problems. Now we ask, where does that creative capacity come from? Are these people simply smarter and crazier than the rest of us? The research says, more often than not, yes, and probably. Tesla as the searchlight. Nikola Tesla's life is our giant searchlight in this chapter. His unusual mix of intelligence, sensory sensitivity, obsessive habits, and sheer mental horsepower make otherwise invisible traits of innovators impossible to ignore. Once you see Tesla sleeping only 2 hours a night and perfectly visualizing machines in his head, you start spotting echoes of the same tendencies in Curie, Franklin, Jobs, Musk, and others. Born in 1856 during a lightning storm, Tesla was raised by a minister father with a prodigious memory and a mechanically gifted mother who invented tools and churns before dawn and worked until late at night. Tesla's childhood in rural Croatia was full of tinkering, cornstalk pop guns, frog-catching hooks, Maybug propellers, and full of trauma, too. At age 7, he lost his brother Dane in a riding accident and began experiencing nightmares and vivid mental images he couldn't switch off. By 10, Tesla was a math prodigy, dazzling teachers, but also battling intense sensory and compulsive quirks, counting steps, avoiding round objects, recoiling at pearls, and needing everything divisible by 3. By 12, he was envisioning vast energy projects, including a water wheel under Niagara Falls, years before it became real. The mind is a laboratory. Tesla's adult life shows what happens when you fuse an eidetic photographic memory with extreme working memory and manic drive. He claimed he could build and test his inventions entirely in his head, checking for balance, noting flaws, making improvements before touching a single tool. Today we'd call that computer-aided design. He just did it with his brain. This mental process led to his breakthroughs in alternating current systems. First dismissed by his professor as impossible, Tesla had a flash of lightning moment while he was walking in a park and reciting Goethe's Fast. In a burst of clarity, he saw how 2 currents 90 degrees out of phase could spin a motor with no commutator. Within 2 months, he'd mentally designed an entire AC system, motors, transformers, dynamos. When he later built them, they worked. Tesla's work ethic was monastic. He studied 20 hours a day at the Polytechnic in Graz, mastered 9 languages, memorized Shakespeare and Voltaire, and sometimes collapsed from exhaustion. He loved the pure joy of the chase, saying his life was continuous rapture when deep in invention. Genius, mania, and memory. Tesla illustrates the 2 big questions about breakthrough innovators. Are they smarter? Are they crazier? He and many of his peers were both. Edison taught himself science after only 3 months of formal schooling, but had a towering memory and endless curiosity. Franklin mapped the Gulf Stream, invented the urinary catheter, and wrote under pseudonyms to sneak ideas into print. Curie devoured physics and math, working to exhaustion. Musk absorbs whole domains into his head and runs physics equations in real time. What ties them together is working memory plus long-term memory. Exceptional working memory lets you juggle multiple chunks of information simultaneously. Exceptional long-term memory gives you more chunks to work with. Tesla and Musk can take extraordinarily long association paths in their heads, making obvious connections that the rest of us just can't see yet. Primary process thinking and remote associations. This chapter dives into the mental state behind big leaps. Freud called it primary process thinking, the unstructured, daydreamy mode where ideas collide. Showers, music, long walks, all can unlock it. Musk calls it somewhat cliché, but admits many of his ideas come in the shower. Einstein played violin to untangle his physics problems, then suddenly would shout, "I've got it!" Highly creative people aren't just random. They explore longer, faster association chains, which feels like magic to outsiders. Benedek and Neubauer's studies show that they reach the less obvious ideas sooner because they blow through the obvious ones more quickly. Tesla's and Musk's instant deductions, whether about commutators or reusable rockets, are case studies in this, openness to experience with a twist. Research shows that openness to experience correlates with creativity, imagination, curiosity, tolerance for ambiguity. Tesla and Einstein both adored literature and poetry, and Tesla literally had his biggest insight while reciting Goethe. Franklin was a polymath, but many innovators combined openness with a ruthless focus. Curie avoided travel and stuck to her lab. Musk had tunnel vision on Mars and energy. It may be that the exceptional innovators have a peculiar blend, open-minded enough to generate ideas, but obsessive enough to push them through to reality. Dopamine, mania, and the madness question. This chapter then takes us into new neuroscience. Dopamine and norepinephrine systems in the brain may underlie both creativity and mania. Lower latent inhibition, basically weaker filters on incoming stimuli, can open the door to novel connections. Moderately elevated dopamine helps creativity. Excess dopamine can tip into psychosis. Tesla personifies this spectrum. He had hypersensitive hearing and vision, claiming a fly landing on a table sounded like a thud in his ear. Little need for sleep, bursts of intense work, and lifelong obsessive rituals. Modern parallels show Parkinson's patients on L-Dopa suddenly painting or composing. Dopamine can literally turn on creativity. Across the innovators, sleep deprivation is common. Curie, Edison, Franklin, Jobs, Kamen, all slept far less than average. Only Einstein was a normal sleeper at 10 hours a night. This is another clue. Mild mania or heightened dopamine may be a creative supercharger. Tesla versus Edison. Two archetypes. Tesla and Edison were both relentless, but very different. Edison extended what he already worked on, commercializing incrementally. Tesla dreamed in world-changing leaps, like wireless power or interplanetary communication. Edison patented fiercely and became rich. Tesla neglected patents, was maneuvered out of credit, and died poor. Yet it was Tesla's AC system, not Edison's DC, that powers our world. Tesla's dream of Niagara Falls power became reality in 1896, and his name briefly surged. But his Wardenclyffe Tower, a global wireless energy project, was dismantled for scrap when funds dried up. Edison's DC system is a footnote. Tesla's AC is infrastructure. The bigger picture, creativity as a system. Taken together, this chapter argues that breakthrough creativity emerges from exceptional intelligence and memory, enabling long association paths. Primary process thinking, daydreaming, music, showers, and mental laundering. Openness to experience, but paired with intense focus. Atypical brain chemistry, dopamine and norepinephrine, tweaks that lower inhibition, heighten sensitivity, and sometimes produce mania. And self-efficacy, reinforced by early wins and persistence. None of these factors alone is enough, but together they create minds like Tesla's and Musk's, people who don't just dream big, but can actually execute big. The takeaway is this. Tesla's life shows the promise and perils of the creative mind. His ideas truly did come in an uninterrupted stream, but at the cost of social isolation, obsessive habits, and financial loss. The same forces that produced the alternating current revolution also produced hallucinations, insomnia, and compulsive rituals. Yet, as Musk puts it, if something's important enough, you should try even if the probable outcome is failure. And as Jobs said, going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters. This chapter is about understanding that extraordinary creativity is not magic. It's a set of mental capabilities, traits, and sometimes biological quirks that anyone studying innovation needs to reckon with. Chapter 4. Once she had recognized a certain way as a right one, she pursued it without compromise. A higher purpose. If the earlier chapters showed how innovators think big and trust themselves, this chapter digs into why they're willing to push themselves so hard and take such risks and endure so much criticism. The answer, over and over, is idealism. A higher purpose that drives them beyond ordinary effort, often at great personal cost. Idealism is the engine of relentless effort. The great innovators didn't just tinker with gadgets, they set out to reshape the world. Franklin wanted a fairer society. Curie wanted to advance science and benefit humanity. Musk wants to secure humanity's survival. Kamen wants to give clean water and mobility to millions. They worked ferociously long hours, neglected comforts, and withstood harsh attacks because they believed their work mattered far more than their own comfort or reputation. Benjamin Franklin's story, from printer to public servant. Franklin's life reads like a blueprint for idealistic innovation. Born in 1706 to a working-class family, he devoured books and moral philosophy as a child and initially trained for the ministry. Money was tight, so he apprenticed with his brother as a printer, and soon found his voice as a writer. Through the pseudonym Silence Dogood, Franklin mocked arbitrary authority and advocated for education, women's rights, and civic improvement. By his early 20s, he had launched his own newspaper and become known as a relentless worker. He even hauled paper through the streets himself to show he wasn't above manual labor. But it's Franklin's 13 virtues that reveal his inner compass. He created a system to methodically improve himself: temperance, frugality, industry, sincerity, humility, tracking his progress each day. He donated his inventions, like the Franklin stove, bifocals, and lightning rods, to the public rather than patenting them, believing that we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others, just as others' inventions had served us. Franklin's idealism wasn't just personal, it was civic. He founded the first lending library, the volunteer fire department, and a non-sectarian university, later the University of Pennsylvania. As a diplomat, he endured humiliations like the Wetterberg attack in London because he believed his cause, an egalitarian, self-governing America, mattered more than his pride. Dean Kamen, Stirling engines, and iBots, not vacations. Fast forward to our own time. Dean Kamen embodies the same idealistic drive. He's poured tens of millions of his own money into inventions like the slingshot, a water purifier, and Stirling engines that can run off cow dung methane to produce electricity. Kamen knows the poorest communities can't pay for these machines, but as he says, you've got to try. Look at the state of the world. It's a mess. What if we can fix it? His iBot wheelchair, designed to restore dignity by climbing stairs and letting disabled users look others in the eye, shows how much his designs are driven by empathy, not just engineering. Elon Musk, organizing every venture around a grand mission. Elon Musk's higher purpose is to solve the Earth's finite resource problem and make humanity interplanetary. That's why he founded SpaceX and Solar City and invested heavily in Tesla's electric cars. Even when he was nearly bankrupt, he refused to take SpaceX public because he believed it would jeopardize the Mars mission. His mother says it best, he's just determined to make things better. What about Marie Curie? Marie Curie lived the idealistic life to the extreme. She never patented her radium isolation process, gave away much of her Nobel Prize money, and refused personal gifts. She believed science belonged to humanity, but her devotion came at a cost. Fainting at her lab bench from overwork, and her daughters largely raised by their grandfather, Einstein eulogized her as someone whose will and purity were kind of seldom found. Her daughter, Eve, later wrote of longing for more of her mother's presence, even as she admired her principles. The benefits and costs of idealism. This chapter doesn't romanticize idealism. It shows both its power and its price. Idealism gives innovators the courage to weather ridicule and failure. Franklin facing a jeering Privy Council, Einstein writing papers as a patent clerk despite being ignored by academia, Jobs being ousted from Apple but coming back with Next. It also helps them filter distractions. As Kamen says, if you're not working on important things, you're wasting time. But idealism can also blind innovators to practicalities. Tesla's obsession with his Wardenclyffe Tower, a grander global wireless energy scheme than his backer J.P. Morgan had agreed to, caused him to burn through funding and lose the project. Edison, by contrast, with less idealism but more opportunism, bounced from project to project but often left ideas half-finished. Each innovator's idealism had distinct roots. Franklin's came from Puritan duty, evolved into civic virtue. Jobs was steeped in Zen minimalism and the belief that tools could amplify human potential. The computer is the bicycle for the mind metaphor is an example of this. Curie's idealism was grounded in Polish positivism, the belief that education and science were patriotic acts of resistance against the oppression. This chapter closes with a warning. Idealism has powered the greatest breakthroughs in science and human rights, but also the worst atrocities. Nationalism and religious fervor have justified wars, genocide, and repression. As Roy Baumeister notes, holy wars can be bloodier than pragmatic wars because they dispense with compromise. Idealism, like nuclear energy, must be nurtured with care. The takeaway is this. Idealism is the hidden battery that powers extraordinary innovators. It's what lets them endure failure, sacrifice comfort, and focus for decades on goals that most people would call impossible. But it also requires trade-offs, time with family, attention to finances, and sometimes even one's health. As I argue in this chapter, if you want to nurture idealism in yourself and others, you must also build structures that temper it. Early wins, support networks, and checks against destructive tunnel vision. Idealism is not just lofty thinking. It's the deep current under the surface that shapes how great innovators work, live, and change the world. Chapter 5. Driven to Work. Work made the earth a paradise for me. If Chapter 4 showed how idealism can light a fire under innovators, Chapter 5 shows something different, sheer drive. This chapter is about the people who work because they must, not because of some lofty ideal, but because working itself is their oxygen. Thomas Edison is our archetype here. Unlike Franklin, Tesla, Curie, or Musk, Edison didn't really frame his life's work as a noble mission. When asked, "What is life?" by a reporter, he shrugged off philosophy and said he only thought about making electricity perform work. He didn't soar, he said, kept his feet on the ground, yet no one worked harder or more obsessively. Edison had a relentless work ethic. Born in 1847 in Milan, Ohio, Edison's early life reads like a prototype of grit. His father, Samuel, was a relentless entrepreneur who lost fortunes and relocated the family several times. His mother, Nancy, a former high school teacher, saw genius in her hyperactive, distractible boy and pulled him out of school after a teacher called him addled. She homeschooled him, fed him classic books, and gave him R.G. Parker's School of Natural Philosophy, which turned Edison's curiosity about experiments into a lifelong habit. By 12, he was already working full-time, selling newspapers, candy, and even produce on the Grand Trunk Railway. He launched 2 stands and published his own train car newspaper, the Weekly Herald. He even ran a mini lab in the baggage car until a phosphorus accident got him and his lab thrown off the train. A dramatic incident at age 15 shows his character. Edison saved a 3-year-old from an oncoming train, injuring himself in the process. The grateful station agent taught him Morse code, and Edison soon became a telegraph operator. He was still a teenager. Inventor, not idealist. Edison's first patent, an electric vote recorder, didn't sell, but it cemented his path. By 1870, he had left wage work entirely, moving from city to city, founding small telegraph firms, and joking to his parents that he was now a bloated Eastern manufacturer. His personal life reveals the same intensity. He married Mary Stilwell in 1871, but was found at his desk at midnight on his wedding day, muttering, "I was married today." Mary never felt neglected, she said, but she was left alone while Edison worked days and nights. In Menlo Park, New Jersey, Edison built a lab designed for maximal invention. His assistants routinely worked through the night. Edison ordered midnight dinners for the team and then sent everyone back to the benches. This is where in 1877 a throwaway remark led to his most magical creation. Tinkering with diaphragms and sound waves, he said to his assistant, "If we had a point on this, we could make a record, and it would give us the speech back." Within an hour, they had the first working phonograph, working on a cylinder, complete with "Mary Had a Little Lamb" etched into tin foil. Scientific American gushed over this talking phonograph, and suddenly the Wizard of Menlo Park was a household name. But true to form, Edison dithered over commercializing it, moving on to new challenges instead. Lighting the world. By late 1878, Edison had shifted focus again, now to incandescent lighting. He worked around the clock, carbonizing everything from fishing line to cedar to find the perfect filament. Every quarter of the globe was ransacked. Finally, in 1880, he patented a long-lasting light bulb with a bamboo filament. At 33, Edison had transformed indoor lighting and began installing a power grid in Manhattan. But once the system was stable, Edison got bored and sold his stake in Edison General Electric, just before it became General Electric. He lost millions, but cheerfully said, "Well, it's gone. We had a good time spending it." He poured himself into an iron ore mining venture in New Jersey, working in filthy, freezing conditions for 5 years. Mina, his second wife, ran the home. Edison called her his home executive, writing her tender but slightly comical love notes from the mine. Darling, sweetest, loveliest, cutest. The mine failed too, but Edison enjoyed every minute of the technical challenge. Work is joy and identity. Edison's pattern repeated with the motion pictures and batteries. He was too deaf to hear the phonograph or see the kinetoscope as entertainment devices, so he underinvested in them. Yet, still his name became synonymous with moving pictures and sound recording. His attempt at revolutionary electric car battery consumed years and thousands of experiments. When a friend pitied him for the failures, Edison snapped back, "Results? I know thousands of things that don't work." This line sums him up. His work wasn't punishment, it was play. And as he said late in life, "I never intend to retire. Work made the earth a paradise for me." His work ethos. What Edison shows us is that many innovators are powered not only by ideals, but also by an almost biological drive to work. Franklin extolled industriousness as a virtue. Tesla, influenced by his tireless mother, routinely worked from 3 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. Dean Kamen, Elon Musk, and Steve Jobs also showed similar obsessive schedules. Psychologists like David McClellan call this the need for achievement, a personality trait that drives people to tackle difficult tasks, persist through setbacks, and seek feedback and mastery. High-achieving children often have parents who set high standards while encouraging self-reliance, just as Edison and Tesla did. There's also a physical dimension. Some people simply have more voluntary energy expenditure. They're like border collies who need a job or they go stir-crazy. Edison's assistants noticed he had physical and mental strength without limits. Modern research on flow by Smiley C6Emily gives us the language for it. Being totally immersed in a challenge creates a deep, almost addictive pleasure. Edison embodied this state. The takeaway? Not just ideals, but drive. Where Franklin, Curie, and Musk were driven by ideals of a better world, Edison was driven by the work itself. He didn't need a grand narrative to push him. The problem in front of him was enough. His story reminds us that passion for the process, the joy of solving, tinkering, and persisting can be just as powerful a motivator as any lofty mission. In short, this chapter shows us that world-changing innovation doesn't always spring from high ideals. Sometimes it springs from pure work, the thrill of the challenge, the stamina to outlast everyone else, and the satisfaction of seeing an idea take shape under your hands. Chapter 6, Opportunities and Challenges of an Era. When we think about serial breakthrough innovators, we often wonder how much of their success is just luck, being in the right place at the right time. In this chapter, I argue the answer is quite a lot, but not enough on its own. Timing and environment create fertile ground, but only a few rare people actually turn that opportunity into world-changing impact. Technological and cultural shifts. The Industrial Revolution, the counterculture of the 60s, the rise of the Internet, these open up massive new playing fields. But even in these rich periods, most inventors don't become Edison, Curie, or Jobs. This chapter explores how timing shaped the lives of the innovators we've been studying, both the opportunities and the obstacles, starting with a powerful case study, Marie Curie. Curie's childhood in Russian-occupied Poland shows how timing can cut both ways. Born in 1867, she grew up under Tsarist policies banning Polish language, history, and culture from classrooms. Her father, a math and physics teacher, and her mother, headmistress of a girls' school, defied the rules by secretly teaching Polish literature and science. Marie's earliest schooling included a double life, official Russian curriculum on paper and forbidden Polish lessons at the sound of a hidden bell. But timing also brought tragedy. Her mother contracted tuberculosis, her sister Zofia died of typhus, and by age 10, Marie had lost both of them. She retreated inward, hiding in schoolwork and showing the steel that would later define her scientific career. Despite grief and poverty, she topped her Russian gymnasium class at 15 and earned a gold medal, then suffered a nervous collapse, an early glimpse of the depression she fought her whole life. Yet the same era also brought extraordinary openings. The clandestine Flying University of Warsaw, born of Polish positivism, gave women secret access to higher education. Marie joined and even risked punishment by teaching Polish peasant children in her off hours as a governess. She and her sister, Bronia, devised a pact. Marie would fund Bronia's studies in Paris. Then Bronia would help Marie follow. This was only possible because European universities, starting in Zurich and Paris, had begun admitting women just a generation earlier. Had she been born 30 years earlier, she would have been shut out entirely. When she finally arrived in Paris in 1891, she brought a feather mattress, a stool, and almost no money. She rented an unheated room where her water froze in winter, but threw herself into studies at the Sorbonne, earning master's degrees in physics and math. There she met Pierre Curie, and together they built a partnership that transformed science. With Pierre's custom-built electrometer, Marie discovered polonium and radium, proposed the theory of radioactivity, and became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and later the first person ever to win two in different fields. But again, timing posed challenges. She endured sexism so blatantly that she was nearly excluded from her first Nobel and barred from the French Academy of Sciences entirely. When Lord Kelvin attacked her discoveries in the press because he was jealous, she didn't fight back publicly. She simply perfected her measurements until no one could doubt her results. She pioneered radiation therapy for tumors, mobilized X-ray units during World War I to save soldiers' lives, and inspired a generation of women scientists, even as the radiation exposure that made her famous ultimately killed her. Curie's life shows the two-sided coin of timing. Her era's clandestine Polish education, early women's access to the Sorbonne, and Pierre's electrometer gave her a path few could have imagined, yet the same era's sexism and scientific rivalries nearly derailed her. Curie's story is mirrored in more modern examples. Technological shocks like the personal computer and the internet didn't just change one industry, they opened a global sandbox for new ideas. Between the late 70s and the mid-1990s, this fertile soil produced Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Linus Torvalds, Tim Berners-Lee, Jeff Bezos, Mark Andreessen, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin. Shocks don't have to be technological. The 1973 OPEC oil embargo quadrupled oil prices and suddenly made efficiency in renewables urgent, accelerating solar power innovation from $100 per watt to $20 per watt. Even oil companies adopted solar cells for offshore rig lights. Social movements also matter. Jobs' identification with the 1960s counterculture, anti-war protests, civil rights, free speech, women's liberation, shaped his belief in the personal computer as a tool of liberation and creativity rather than just business productivity. As Bono put it, the 60s produced an anarchic mindset, great for imagining a world not yet in existence. War, innovation's double-edged sword. War disrupts lives, but can also create surges of innovation. World War II drew women into science and industry at unprecedented levels. From Rosie the Riveter in aviation to female mathematicians programming the ENIAC computer. Grace Hopper exemplifies this. In 1942, at age 36, she left her safe professorship at Vassar to join the Navy's New Women's Reserve. Her math skills landed her in wartime computing, where she helped develop early programming and later the first computer language, becoming an admiral and a tech industry icon. Without the war, it's unlikely she would have broken into engineering at all. Radar development during World War II is another example. Britain's desperation led Churchill to send its superior magnetron to the U.S. in the secret Tizard mission. Bell Labs worked on the project, leading directly to advances in semiconductors. William Shockley, John Bardeen, and Walter Brattain invented the transistor in 1947. When Shockley moved to Mountain View to care for his mother, 8 of his best people left to found Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild then spawned dozens of startups, creating Silicon Valley itself. This path dependence, a fragile chain of ifs, shows how the timing of war, migration, and personality can give rise to entire ecosystems. Edison, Tesla, and path dependence. We see similar what-ifs in earlier generations. Edison only got his first telegraph job because he saved a station master's child from an oncoming train. He and Tesla both emerged during the electric revolution, when Maxwell, Faraday, and Ohm had already laid the groundwork. Had they been born in a less electrified time, their fame might have attached to entirely different inventions or not at all. The takeaway. Chapter 6 underscores that while timing, place, and social context matter enormously, they're not the whole story. Thousands of people were working on electricity in the 1800s, but only a few became Edison or Tesla. Röntgen and Becquerel glimpsed radioactivity, but did not pursue it with Curie's ferocity. Likewise, many built early computers, but only a handful became Jobs or Gates. The lesson here is being born in the right era gives you a stage, but you still need the drive, persistence, and imagination to own it. Serial breakthrough innovators don't just benefit from history, they seize it, mold it, and keep it showing up long after others have moved on. Chapter 7. Access to Resources. It's not about the money, it's about the people you have, how you're led, and how much you get it. In the last chapter, we explored how timing and environment shape breakthrough innovators. Now, we turn to another key ingredient, access to resources, not just financial capital, but the technological, intellectual, and human resources that surround an innovator and allow ideas to come to reality. The money myth. Conventional wisdom says innovation requires money and formal education. But if you look closely at the lives of great innovators, the pattern is very different. Benjamin Franklin arrived in New York with only enough for 2 loaves of bread. Thomas Edison had almost no formal schooling and built himself up from selling newspapers to running a lab. Elon Musk came to Canada with virtually nothing, working odd jobs to survive. Marie Curie lived in freezing rooms as a student and performed world-class research in a wooden shack. Tesla arrived in America with 4 cents in his pocket. They were not cushioned by wealth. In fact, that hunger may have strengthened them. What they did have in spades were access to people, tools, knowledge, and laboratories. Jobs summed it up perfectly years later. Innovation has nothing to do with how many R&D dollars you have. It's about the people you have, how you're led, and how much you get it. Steve Jobs and the power of place. Jobs' story shows this vividly. Born in 1955 to graduate students, adopted by a working-class couple in Mountain View, California, Steve grew up in the heart of what would become Silicon Valley. His dad's garage workshop, stuffed with perfectly arranged tools and long afternoons fixing cars, taught him craftsmanship, attention to hidden details, and a belief he could build anything. Even more powerful was the cluster effect. Mountain View wasn't just any suburb. Lockheed, NASA, Hewlett-Packard, Fairchild Semiconductor, and Stanford's engineering labs were all nearby. As Jobs put it, the mysteries of the trade were in the air. By age 12, he was already on a NASA computer terminal. At 14, he was playing with an early HP desktop. His neighborhood produced not just mentors, but also lifelong collaborators. One neighbor was Francis Wozniak, whose son, Steve Woz, would become Jobs' partner. Wozniak was a gifted engineer, the hardware genius to Jobs' visionary instincts. Together, their synergy created Apple's first breakthrough products, starting with the Apple I and then the Apple II. Apple's origin story is a lesson in how far resourcefulness can take you. Jobs and Woz started in Jobs' parents' garage with $1,300 raised by selling Woz's calculator and Jobs' VW van. The first big order was structured on 30-day terms so that they could deliver before they had to pay the supplier. As they moved from hobbyist kits to the polished Apple II, they needed capital and marketing expertise. Jobs' Silicon Valley network opened doors to Atari's Nolan Bushnell, Sequoia Capital's Don Valentine, and ultimately Mike Markula, a retired Intel executive who became Apple's first major investor and mentor. Markula didn't just invest money, he brought the know-how and connections of a seasoned technology marketer, laying the foundation for Apple's rise. By the late 70s and early 80s, Apple was selling millions and then hundreds of millions and forcing giants like IBM to scramble. Along the way, Jobs' exposure to Xerox PARC gave him the spark for the graphical user interface, the mouse, and his obsession with intuitive design gave birth to the Macintosh. Again and again, Apple's breakthroughs came from absorbing, adapting, and extending the ideas circulating in its environment, not from raw cache alone. Jobs' ouster from Apple in 1985 might have ended the story, but instead it underscored another truth. Great innovators carry their vision with them. He built Next, invested in Pixar, and kept experimenting. Next software would eventually become the backbone of Apple's new operating system. Pixar would transform animation forever. By the time Apple was near bankruptcy in 1996, it bought Next to save itself and brought Jobs back. On his return, Jobs refocused Apple, killed dozens of projects, and poured energy into a few perfect products: the iMac, iPod, iTunes, iPhone, and iPad, each one leveraging not only his vision, but also the world-class talent he had assembled around him: Jonathan Ive, Tim Cook, and many others. Under Jobs, Apple became a serial innovation machine, creating bicycles for the mind that reshaped how we live. Jobs wasn't unique. Curie's father smuggled home lab equipment when Russian authorities banned it, and Pierre Curie built her custom electrometers to measure infinitesimal levels of currents. Franklin devoured books and founded America's first lending library. Edison and Musk built teams of brilliant people around them. Even Einstein made his greatest breakthroughs while working at a patent office supported by self-study and occasional collaboration. What unites them is not money or degrees, but voracious learning and access to the right tools, ideas, and collaborators. Some, like Franklin and Curie, learned on books. Others, like Jobs, learned on neighbors, mentors, and labs. Many dropped out of formal schooling, but stayed aggressive consumers of knowledge on their own terms. The people are the resource. At the heart of these stories are people. Jobs without Wozniak might never have built Apple. Curie without Pierre might never have measured radioactivity. Pixar without Ed Catmull, Alvy Ray Smith, and John Lasseter would never have made Toy Story. Each breakthrough came from a fusion of visionary leadership plus technical skill. Jobs and Curie provided the clearest pattern: a leader with intense purpose surrounded by top-tier technical and intellectual resources. The bigger lesson: democratize access. This chapter closes with a call to action. If we want more breakthrough innovation, we should widen access to intellectual and technological resources. Public libraries were a start. Digital libraries, public marketplaces, community labs, and incubators could be the next wave. Breakthroughs don't always come from credentialed scientists following a typical path. They come from driven minds with the right tools at the right time. In short, money alone is never enough. Breakthrough innovation succeeds because it combines relentless curiosity, high self-efficacy, and access to a rich network of ideas, people, and tools, and then they do the hard work of bringing the visions to life. Chapter 8. Nurturing the potential that lies within. You get creative people, you bet big on them, you give them enormous leeway and support. After studying breakthrough innovators as different as Franklin and Curie, it's clear to me that their extraordinary output came from a blend of traits plus situational advantages, not just one or the other. Intelligence, unconventionality, self-efficacy, resilience, and timing all converged. What's most exciting is that while we can't all be Marie Curie or Steve Jobs, we can adopt the mechanisms that nurtured their creativity and persistence. This chapter is about how to do just that, in companies, in schools, and even at home. Challenging norms. Why separateness works. One of the strongest themes across innovators is how their sense of being outsiders allowed them to question orthodoxy. Einstein broke Newtonian physics partly because he was working as a patent clerk, outside the academic hierarchy. Musk built reusable rockets partly because he wasn't supposed to know better. He wasn't a career space industry insider. Being socially detached has costs, but it also liberates thinking. Organizations can simulate some of this by giving people flexible roles, autonomy, and explicit permission to question norms. Atari did this when Al Alcorn, its CEO, hired a scruffy barefoot Steve Jobs, recognizing the creative spark beneath the unconventional exterior. It's a reminder to look past appearances and tap the creative potential sitting in plain sight. Pixar shows what it looks like to do this at scale. In its daily session, artists show unfinished work to directors and peers. Everyone gets humiliated and encouraged together. This shared blunt feedback spreads solutions across the studio so everyone adds new tools to their kit. Teams are deliberately kept small, leaders are chosen for vision and expertise rather than seniority, and creatives are given autonomy over schedules, dress, and office arrangements. As Ed Catmull puts it, you get creative people, you bet big on them, and you give them enormous leeway and support. Beware of the trap of consensus. If you want real innovation, don't require consensus too early. Consensus leads to safe incremental extensions of what already exists. Would Apple's team have ever agreed to develop the iPod in 2000, a crowded market littered with failures? Probably not. CERN handles this by letting multiple teams pursue competing approaches to the same problem and only later comparing the results, protecting unique ideas from premature extinction. The power of solitude. Breakthrough ideas need incubation. Every child and every employee needs time alone to explore personal interests and develop independent thinking. Edison's basement chemistry experiments, Musk's science fiction marathons and self-taught coding, Einstein's thought experiments about light beams, were all solo explorations that seeded historic breakthroughs. For parents, this can be liberating. Your quirky, rule-changing child who struggles in structured classrooms may be developing the very traits that lead to originality. Rather than overloading kids with team sports and group activities, balance them with time to read, tinker, and reflect. For organizations, it's the same principle. Let people sketch their ideas individually before group brainstorming. Groupthink and dominant personalities can snuff out fragile ideas. A little isolation gives them a chance to grow. Google's most famous projects, Google News and Gmail, both began as independent side projects by single engineers following their own curiosity. Skunkworks and physical separation. This principle of separateness applies to teams too. Jobs moved the Macintosh project out of Apple's main building, flying a pirate flag over it. Lockheed's Skunkworks did the same in 1943, building the XP-80 jet fighter in just 143 days. Today, companies from Amazon, Lab 126, to Google, X, to Nike, Innovation Kitchen, follow this model, giving secretive, autonomous teams room to defy the parent company's norms and build something revolutionary. Building self-efficacy and celebrating failure. Tesla's first victory over his physics professor gave him lifelong confidence. We can give others early wins too, then lower the cost of failure so people take intelligent risks. A.J. Lafley at Procter & Gamble publicly celebrated product failures because of the learning they produced. Eli Lilly throws parties for its best failures, and Tata Group gives an annual prize for the boldest failure. Frog Design holds retrospectives to extract lessons from projects that didn't meet expectations. These rituals normalize experimentation and build the resilience innovation requires. Big, meaningful goals energize people more than small incentives. Google's mission to organize the world's information, Bristol-Myers Squibb's to help patients prevail over serious diseases. These ideals can function as a compass for daily decisions and spark intrinsic motivation. The same is true for kids. Nurturing idealism can make work more purposeful and more satisfying. Finding flow at work. Mahali's concept of flow is about losing yourself in meaningful challenge. One striking case, Sweden's Green Cargo Rail Company reorganized so each manager had only 3 or 4 direct reports and was explicitly responsible for improving how each person felt about their work. Employees were randomly pinged throughout the day to report how creative or focused they felt, and managers adjusted their roles accordingly. Absenteeism went down, profits went up. The lesson: know your people, align their strengths with the organization's challenges, and let intrinsic motivation drive results. Expanding access to intellectual resources. Benjamin Franklin founded America's first lending library. Google tried to digitize the world books. Open access academic publishing is making research freely available. Citizen science labs like BioCurious, GenSpace, and Boss Lab open up lab space to non-traditional experimenters who can learn to modify yeast or grow fungus-based textiles. Outsiders like Dean Kamen and Elon Musk show how breakthroughs often come from people who aren't credentialed specialists but who bring fresh eyes and relentless motivation. To accelerate innovation, we need to connect people with both the knowledge and the experts they need. Expertise pools, shared lab, digital libraries, and new consortia that blend professionals with passionate outsiders. The big takeaway here is we can nurture innovation everywhere. By carefully studying breakthrough innovators, we see not only what made them unique, but also how to replicate the conditions that nurtured their ideas. Give people autonomy, space to be different, time to think alone, tolerance for bold failure, and access to deep knowledge and tools. Encourage outsiders and unconventional thinkers. Align work with intrinsic motivations and grand missions. We can't all be serial breakthrough innovators, but we can borrow the mechanisms that help them all flourish at home, in schools, in labs, and inside our companies. And in doing so, we can unleash much more of the creative potential that lies within us all. So that wraps it up. This has been Quirky by Melissa Shilling. Remember that our website is innoguide.net, where we have many resources for innovators, people building products, and those who want to learn AI. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this, and I want to thank you for joining. I look forward to seeing you next time. That's a wrap.